Okay. All right. We are live on Facebook. We are also live on, we're recording this as well. So we should be good to go here. I'm going to go ahead and get started with all of this. If I can get this to work. Okay, so we've got Pete Casamento with us here today. And Pete, why don't you walk us through, the background of yourself, the background of GBGI. The purpose of tonight's webinar is to inform everyone about GBGI, what they do, and how they have disrupted the disc opener market, which it seems everyone and their brother sells a disc opener. There's obviously different qualities. Pete came to Fennig Equipment a while back and kind of caught my attention with the quality. And he really grabbed my attention when he said that he manufactured the Salford hub and bearing, which Fennig Equipment has had very good success with the Salford hub and bearing. So that really kind of drew me into Pete and his team. So Pete, I'll let you take it from here on kind of introducing yourself and GBGI.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Pete with Pete Casamento with GBGI. A little history on the company. From an OEM standpoint, for short liners, like Adam mentioned, we do quite a bit of disc hubs for Salford tillage. We started our business based on the foundation of preventing bearing failures. So before we even produced hubs and spindles, we manufactured seals that extended and reduced bearing warranty on hubs and spindles for the agricultural OEMs, or the short liners, I should say.
Okay.
A few years into the business, Adam, we started GBGI, where we produced hubs, spindles, but we looked at things in a different way, where we just didn't put a seal in like you see in a lot of wheel hubs. We looked at what we built our business around, which was manufacturing our castings made in the USA. Like you saw on some of the notes I sent you, we buy our steel bars from Nucor or Steel Dynamics stateside. We believe in making a quality product, and we supply several of the short liners in stateside. And we also supply several of the short liners up in Western Canada. We took that mindset, and we've been doing that since 1993. And from there, probably a few years ago, we knew we were going to start a aftermarket group, but we wanted to do something different. And by different, what I meant is we did not want to go through distributors. We wanted to go through more dealer direct, like Fennig Equipment. We approached Adam and his father on the opener. And what we had done is probably 3 to 4 years of testing. We had listened to farmers on the heavy-duty XP planter, some of the issues and concerns that the farmers had. It's more following that precision planning concept of a true V, reduction in wobble. So in our 3 to 4 years of testing, we first started up in North Dakota with this opener. But one of the things that we found is the soil is not as aggressive. So we took that opener and went further south into Kansas and into Texas, where you got a lot of hard-baked, hard-pan soil.
Okay.
So
what, that's all good stuff. Where exactly is GBGI located, Pete?
We are on the east side of Cleveland. If you're familiar with Cleveland, Ohio, 30 miles east of Cleveland, right off I-90 in Chardon, Ohio.
Okay, good to know. We're going to get into things as far as, the exact quality of the GBGI. But, you know, what I want to get into and what I want to avoid in this webinar is people have probably been sold several different times that their dealer has got the next greatest and latest disc opener for them. Just real quick, briefly, as we dig into this, for people that have never seen the GBGI blade, why don't you give them a quick 30-second on what in the world makes this opener a little bit different?
Well, the biggest thing is what we feel is it's the ductile iron opener. So unlike a stamped opener, we have a lot of precision tolerances that we have incorporated into the housing that translate into better bearing performance and less run out onto the disc blade.
So you're saying when you talk ductile iron, you're talking the bearing housing. You know, a lot of them today, every other one that I've ever seen, I believe, is stamped. So basically a machine comes through and it just has a stamp and it just stamps out as many as it quickly can. Not really looking for precision, but looking to cut costs and basically have the lowest dollar opener on the market, whereas GBGI came in and said that they could do better by creating a ductile iron cast hub. When you're talking the precision machining, where is that at?
That's done here in-house in Chardon, Ohio on one of our automated cells.
And where at on the blade? Like that's the inside diameter of that cast hub?
So yes, we actually, if you look at the cast hub, the OD of that cast hub is 3.62 inches. We machine that whole backside of that cast hub to an RMS 32 finish roughly. So that means you're going to have 100% contact surface with that disc blade, unlike a stamping. Second, we hold it parallel and perpendicular to the bearing bore, and we hold that bearing bore tolerance to where we're within half a thou to a thou and a half press fit with the bearing at all times.
Gotcha. And I've got a blade here with me as I'm standing here and looking at it. And we'll get into a lot of this stuff here in a little bit, guys. We're going to move on to the next slide here shortly. But if you just hold this blade, and I've done it with a lot of my customers, I just hand them the blade and they kind of grab it and say, wow, that thing is beefy. It feels heavier. It looks well machined. The rivets on this thing are huge. Probably, I don't know what, Pete, 1/2-inch rivets?
No, we actually increased the rivet size. Well, that's the other thing we did. A lot of the farmers and rocks or the heavy stalks, we recessed the rivets on this opener. That's 5/16 of the rivet size versus 220. So that's another thing that we did to help in the run out of the blade. Where that rivet's recessed, we've actually milled the pocket in there to hold it true.
I see. Yep, you can see that in the blade. We're going to move on to the next slide here quick, Pete. And the next slide is you talking a little bit of the history of GBGI. So I'm going to play a clip of that. You did a good job of explaining that earlier, but I want to play a clip of that here for everyone to listen to. So that was just a short clip of the videos of the introduction of the GBGI. But as you guys can see, it's it's a machine shop that you can actually go stand in and put your eyes on. It's not a bunch of overseas parts that are pieced together to make your opener. So now, Pete, why don't we run down through right here on this hub? It says USA on the hub. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's hard to come by in the blade world. What all components can be called USA? And walk me through, you've told me several times, well, this blade is OEM approved. What does that mean?
So your blade manufacturer is Osmundson, okay?
Yep.
They are a John Deere supplier, and they are approved by John Deere on an OEM level. Okay, they supply John Deere several component parts, or they supply John Deere several blades. There are 2 approved bearing sources, and one would be Koyo, and the other would be Pier, which is owned by SKF. As I've told you, I prefer Pier because they have the metal shrouds over the rubber seals. That helps with the life of the house. We feel it helps with the life of the bearing. And third is the ductile iron housing. Now, that housing is cast in Erie, Pennsylvania, and machined right here in Chardon, Ohio. Osmondson disc blades uses USA steel and is produced so you have the consistency of the grain structure in the steel, and it's produced in Perry, Iowa. Now, and then the rivets. All those 3 parts come from the United States.
Got it. Another thing that we need to touch on, it not only is it hard to come by a blade that has USA stamped on it, but also it's got a steel dust cap, Peter. What made you guys go with the steel dust cap? I know that's music to a lot of guys' ears. Yes, it is a little harder to get out if you need to ever take that blade off, but when you put them in, they stay in and they actually do their job, and that is keeping the dust out.
So I really have an R&D aspect when I look at designs, and when I would go into individual dealerships when we were bringing this product to market, I saw these rubber caps when they were shipped in crates, and one of the concerns I had were the rubber caps would get cut or sliced by blades. So one of the things I think that you've seen is the steel cap. It's just more durable. If it hits a rock in the field, it might get dinged or dented, but it won't pop out as easy as a rubber cap.
Correct. And we've seen that. Guys have been very happy with that steel cap so far, and it actually doing its job. I've got a slide up here right now, Pete, that says, what is the problem with today's openers? Everyone, I mean, for the last how many years has just used Shoop or their John Deere openers. I'm going to answer this question just real briefly in some incidents I saw this past spring. I had some local guys that had John Deere openers, and they were cracking that stamped housing. We have this Delta downforce coming out, and they were shearing that stamped housing, and that blade could literally just fall off of that spindle. But why don't you walk me through what is wrong with today's openers? If there's a customer out there listening today and he's getting ready to maybe go purchase some openers for $20 or something, what's wrong with those, and what makes the GBGIs better?
So we're engineer driven, so we look at quality. So what I looked at, and I've heard for years, and I've been told by the OEMs, cast is the future. Well, no one ever, I shouldn't say cast, I should say ductile iron. A cast iron housing or ductile iron is the future. For 25 to 30 years, if not longer, if you look at planter technology, we've used the stamped opener that comes from over, the stamped openers in today's society, yes, they may be produced here stateside, I don't know, but a lot come from overseas. A lot of distributors use, like you were referring to, do not use Deere approved source bearings. They just use, what's the word I'm looking for? A broker. They bring a brokered in bearing. So you're not getting that quality. We use Pier, that's owned by SKF, but their plants are all ISO 9001. They're all certified, and they have their manufacturing processes in place. You have to go with a certified source. And one of the things that you're absolutely right, with the greater down pressure coming, the delta downforce is coming, my thought process was ductile iron can handle shock load. Years ago, some engineers started out with like hubs when we did in the day early days with Salford, we made a 5-bolt out of gray iron, and we started to see some stresses. So we switched that immediately to ductile iron. Ductile iron can handle shock load, and that shock load doesn't get transferred necessarily to the bearing, but it keeps it within the housing.
Gotcha. So what are some stories you've seen? You get across the country and you obviously know the downside of today's openers. I mean, what's the big issue? Is it cracking housings? Is it that the steel doesn't last long enough, or is it run out? Or is it a combination of all three that guys are having problems with?
Well, I'll go into no-till or heavy clay or rocks. I had guys, whether it's 16 or 24 row, and there's several variables. It's reduction of the wobble, which I call run out, or any more of that true V.
Yep.
I see farmers that have 16 row, 24 row, 32 rows. One guy could only get one season. Every year he would have to replace his openers.
Yep.
And, we went in this year. We can't promise you in every situation. It depends how much the farmer plants. But, the one farmer we worked on, his 16 row, he went in and he's going to get a second season out of his openers. We got two other farmers, similar situation, 24 row. They were never able to get a second season. They would have bearing failure too. They had no bearing failure this year, and they're going to second season on their openers. So it's all along that precision line and quality. And you've talked about this before, Adam. You get what you pay for, and I think that's what we're looking at in this situation. The quality pays for itself.
Correct. Yeah, and speaking of run out, I'm going to go over to this video that you sent me, and we're going to play this of the run out of the John Deere blade versus the GBGI blade to show these guys listening what run out is, what it looks like, and how it can affect you. And is that 10 thou?
On the one row unit?
Yeah.
Yes. So that is, you showed the video on the 1770 NT, correct?
Yeah, it's playing right now. I was just asking, is that 10 thousandths?
Yeah, 10 to 11 thousandths run out. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Now the video is moving over to the John Deere opener. We'll play that here.
Okay.
So Pete, we just watched all that run out. What was that we just saw, and what does that run out do when you're planning?
So when you're planning, you want to hold the true V center, seed placement, and what you're really getting when you're planning is, as you can see on the cast opener, we try to minimize run out, and which our end game is producing. So it follows that precision planning. The blades aren't constantly pounding, what I would call a pounding factor from the excessive wobble of that, say, where you're seeing 55 to 60 thou. I mean, so where we have one blade that may be out 11 thou, the other blade may be out, say, 15 to 20 thou. That's minimal. So that's holding a truer trench, which helps with seed placement. Now, we have other tests we're conducting this spring, but until I get that done this spring, I can't share that information because we're not there yet. And it also affects the life of the bearing. We're doing a test for year 2 on this video where we're looking at bearing life as the blade gets down shorter to where it has to be replaced.
Yeah, because a lot of times, today's blades, talking to customers, there is some blade life left, but the bearings are shot. So they've got to go through and replace all new openers, not because the steel was wore out, they measured appropriately, but because the bearings were wore out. Now, when you talk run out and stamped versus steel, what is it about that precision? Is it that bearing cannot fluctuate as much inside of that stamped or inside of that cast housing versus, in that stamped housing, that bearing, there's just enough play to make that blade wobble? Or what is it that creates that run out?
Well, the run out comes from several things. If you look on the stamping, what you'll see is the rivets draw that in, okay? So depending on the manufacturer and the riveting process, that's another thing. The riveting process is very critical. So when you go in there, a lot of times you see how the stamping is radius, and they rely, when they rivet it, to draw that down flush against the blade. Where with a cast opener, the ductile iron cast XP opener that we have with bending equipment, you don't have to rely on that. You've got 100% contact surface with the disc blade. So that's one of the things. 2, stamped steel, when you get in no-till or heavy impact ground, or like you said, you're putting more down pressure on these openers, stamped steel is, I've seen it at the end of a season where you can take your finger and take that bearing and wobble it inside the housing because of the constant pounding that the housing's transmitting right to the bearing.
Yep.
Where on ductile, in a perfect example, and you sort of talked about cracking, we did a nice test last spring on a 16-row, 3,000 acre. We took a shoop opener with a stamped housing. We took a deer opener, well, the rest of them were deer, and then we put GBGI on there. And he did all 3, he did 3,000 acres, 100% no-till in corn. And the shoop opener, you did exactly as I told you would. You're able to take your finger, he had bearing failure, the bearing pivoted inside the housing. The deer opener, the one that we were testing in that row, sheared off. The rivets, the stamped opener came loose from the blade. In the GBGI opener, the bearing turned smooth from day one. Now, due to the acreage in this situation, in the 16-row working, that's a lot more acreage for the blade to cover. All 3 blades were down at their minimum.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Now, another thing, we've been with GBGI for not extremely long, and we put we had a planer in the shop about a month ago, and we put openers on that planer. And I asked the guys in the shop, I said, how did you like them blades? How did you get along with them as you were installing them? And they said, well, we absolutely love them. I said, well, why is that? What makes them different? They said, we went down row by row, and on the first row that we did, we put 3 washer shims on that stud to get our true V at the bottom of that measurement. We went to row 2, we used 3 washer shims. And he said from row 1 to row 12, they use the same amount of washers. And the one thing that a lot of guys don't know is that if you flip these GBGI blades over, if you can see this, um, this blade and housing and the hub and everything that we're talking about, everything is perfectly centered. If you guys would take your standard blades that you've been using for years and flip them upside down and actually spin them and actually measure the run out as you spin that thing, your standard blades are going to spin much like a football, and they're going to show the run out like what Pete showed in that video. And you spin a GBGI, this all sounds really simple. When I tell guys that the GBGI blade is actually centered on the hub, they look at me like I'm crazy. But the truth of it is that a lot of these blades and the manufacturers miss that. And you put a blade on your planer that is literally spinning like a football, and you don't even know it. The GBGI spins true. I would put that thing up against any test out there to see how accurate these things spin. And that's another thing that the shop guys talked about, was how easy it was to get that accurate measurement with the shims at the bottom of those two blades. Now, Pete, what is it that you guys do that's differently to center that blade?
A lot of that will come, well, number one, you hold the parallelism and perpendicular to the bearing bore, okay? That's one of the most critical things, okay? You have a consistent tolerance. And then number two, it's our blade manufacturer. That's something in their manufacturing process that they'll tell you. With our cast opener, we did a process with a dealer last year where they used to have bearings that were not centered on the through hole of the blade. We didn't give them. We sold them 2,000 openers last year. One was off center.
Yeah.
So that's something we're proud of, and I think that comes down to the machining process and also our blade manufacturer's assembly process from a quality standpoint. That's something they standardize when they try to assemble this opener.
Yep. And I believe that just holding the blades and showing them to customers. Typically, if you want someone to find an issue with your product, hand it out to about 12 different customers, and one of them is going to come up with something that they found that is just not right. And I'm telling you, Pete, I've showed this blade to a lot of guys, and everyone I've shown it to has been really impressed with the quality and how the blade looks and its design and that ductile cast iron hub. So that's really impressive to have something like that. You know, as we move forward, a lot of guys listening are probably thinking, well, okay, that's great, but how do I get my hands on these blades? I want to see one. Well, you know, Fennig Equipment's going to the Indianapolis Farm Show in Indiana starting tomorrow, Tuesday, and we'll be there all week. From there, we're going to go to the National No-Till Conference in St. Louis, Missouri. From there, we're going to go to the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky. We have our open house here at our shop January 22nd, and we will be at the Fort Wayne Farm Show there in early January as well. So you guys are going to have a great opportunity to come to our booth and ask us, say, hey, we want to see that GBGI blade. We'd be happy to show it to you, and we can talk over how it can work for you guys to provide a solution for the lack of quality in the disc opener world out there today. Pete, what do you have to add? I think we're going to try and wrap this up here in the next few minutes. What do you think guys need to know? You've been in this business. What haven't we talked about that people ask questions about, or that people really need to know to jump in on GBGI?
Well, I think one of the things is we back what we do. We stand behind what we do. We've always done that. What do they need to know? We are a very innovative company. We're always looking to say, okay, what can we do next to help the farmer? It's the end of the day, it's no different from when we started out in preventing bearing failures for wheel hubs or disc hubs. It's what can we do to make this opener run better, reduce the farmer's input costs. That's what we typically do. And if you can go and eliminate downtime during the season, that's a substantial cost savings to the farmer.
Absolutely. And if they're investing money in their corn planter for meters and downforce, it all starts at the ground. You got to have a quality opener that's making that true V, and you have to keep that true V true. And that can easily be done with the GBGI openers. I've been impressed with the GBGI so far, and Pete and their team and what they've done here with Pfennig equipment. We look forward to working with them a lot in the future. Like I said in the beginning, the goal of this webinar was to get guys familiar with that blade, to walk them through how it's different than the blade that they've been using. Most guys I talk to have never heard of the GBGI blade yet. So I mainly wanted to get guys informed on what's different about the run out and how it's manufactured and how you do things differently, Pete. I feel like we accomplished that. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to call the Pfennig equipment team. If you're in Ohio or Indiana, more than likely, if you ask us to, we'll show up at your farm, bring you a blade, and walk you through how it will work for you. So, Pete, I think that's all I've got. You got anything else?
No, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Pete, for joining on. Working late here on this Monday. I appreciate that. You don't have any snow up there. We're getting snow right here in Coldwater, Ohio, and most of Indiana is right now. So hopefully for your sake, that stays that way.
No, for once it's staying south, and that doesn't happen much.
Yeah. Pete, before we sign off, are you a Cleveland Browns fan?
No, I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and we lost last night to the Bills.
Oh, well, that went downhill fast. I thought maybe you'd be a Browns fan and I'd have to feel sorry for you, but you're even worse than that, I guess.
Yep.
Well, I root on the Cowboys from time to time, so I don't have any room to talk there. But I don't know who's playing tonight, but I might catch that game tonight. So,
good.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks, Pete. If you guys have any more questions, get a hold of Pfennig Equipment. And thanks for tuning in.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Bye.